Q Review, print speaking to the blind, celebrating 40 years of audio newspaper production. Welcome to this week's edition of the National Podcast, recorded at the Bishop Briggs Media Centre by our amazing volunteers. You can get in touch with us via Facebook, Twitter or Instagram using @CuneReview, that is @CuandReview. You can also contact us directly by emailing information@cunereview.com. That is INFORMATION or by calling 0141 772 3976. That's 0141 772 3976.
From the National, Friday the 24th of January 2025, from the Politics section. Cutting cost of public transport is key to tackling poverty. Article written by Mark Ruskell. Public transport shouldn't cost the earth, but navigating Scotland's bus and rail network is becoming increasingly expensive. At present, an average household in the UK spends around 14% of their income on transport, most of which will be out of their control. It's something that we've always worked to address. When the Scottish Greens were part of government, we used our influence to end peak rail fares, which are a needless and unfair tax on workers and students. It made things far simpler and cheaper, with no more unfair surcharges on a journey that crossed peak and off-peak times, depending on which station you started from, and no more having to worry about entitlement cards only being valid at certain times of day. We removed them for a full year, and a lot of us were deeply disappointed when the SNP chose to bring them back. The trial had been a success. It led to a significant increase in rail travel, despite the strikes, delays, and a reduced timetable during that 12-month period, while saving some regular travellers hundreds of pounds. It was a change that came from the same place as free bus travel for everyone under 22, another change that the Scottish Greens worked to deliver to ease the costs for young people and their families. It has been one of the biggest transport successes of devolution and has created a whole new generation of bus users. More than 700,000 young people have taken over 150 million free journeys, opening up the country and supporting local routes. Transport doesn't exist in isolation, and this investment has allowed us to improve access to education, work and social opportunities, while saving money for hundreds of thousands of young people and their families. Yet for some, the price cliff when they lose their free bus pass is huge, particularly in rural areas. That is why the Scottish Greens have put the call for a £2 bus fare cap at the heart of our budget proposals. The savings could be huge. Folks living in the First Minister's constituency are paying an extortionate £5.10 to travel from Blairgowrie to Perth. A £2 cap on bus fares would save a commuter on this journey £31 a week, £124 a month. It's not a new idea. This is a measure that has been in place in towns and cities across England for some time now, which has boosted local bus providers and encouraged regular commuters to leave their car at home. Far too many families are having to cope with surging fare costs simply to go to work, doctor's appointments, or to do a weekly food shop. All that it does is eat directly into the funds that could be better spent on warming their homes or feeding themselves. Everyone should have affordable and accessible public transport, just as everyone deserves warm homes and full bellies. Yet there are far too many who are forced to scrape by, cutting back on the basics to ensure they have money for the bus to work the next day. Despite some progress, there are still a shocking number of children forced to grow up in poverty, and families are having to make the hardest daily decisions on how to get by. With Labour choosing to plunge pensioners into full poverty and follow an austerity agenda, this number is likely to grow. We can and must be a Scotland that protects people and planet at their most vulnerable. Easing the financial pressures on commuters can be a big part of that change. It's a win-win for everyone. Making public transport more accessible leads to less emissions with fewer cars on our roads. Less cars means safer roads for walking, wheeling and cycling too. It also means more opportunities for households to use the money they've saved on travel for days out exploring our country and all it has to offer. Opting to take the bus in a car-centric country is a small but bold step in fighting for climate action. The phrase, "it's cheaper to drive," needs to end. At present, it is often financially cheaper to take the car than to use a bus or a train. But is it cheaper if the end result is a more polluted planet? At what cost is that too much? We must look at Scotland's future and ensure our infrastructure and planning serves and enhances our communities. The status quo of car-driven town planning decimates our natural environment until there is none left for ourselves, our children, and future generations to enjoy. That article was written by Mark Ruskell and read to you by Elizabeth. From The National, Friday the 24th of January 2025, from the Culture section. Diana Ross to perform show at Glasgow OVO Hydro. Article written by Morgan Carmichael. A legendary soul singer is coming to Glasgow this summer. Diana Ross, famous for songs like "I'm Coming Out" and "Upside Down," will be performing at the OVO Hydro in the West End. The show, which will take place on June 25th, is part of Ross's Symphonic Celebration UK tour, where she will be joined by an ensemble of great musicians of soul, jazz, rock and pop. As part of her Hydro show, Ross will share the stage with the Royal Scottish National Orchestra. Venue pre-sales will take place at 10 a.m. on Thursday, January 30th. Meanwhile, general sale will go live on Friday, January 31st at 10 a.m. Visit www.aegpresents.co.uk to purchase tickets. That article was written by Morgan Carmichael and read to you by Elizabeth. From The National, Friday the 24th of January 2025, from the Politics section. Gains for Labour and Tories in Scottish Council by-election in Edinburgh. Article written by Adam Robertson. The Conservatives and Labour picked up seats from the SNP and Lib Dems in a by-election in Edinburgh. 2 councillors had to be elected in the Colinton-Fairmile Head ward after 2 resignations. Louise Spence of the Scottish Liberal Democrats stepped down just 8 days after her by-election win, while the SNP's Marco Biagio stepped down to take up a position with the Scottish Government. Neil Cuthbert of the Scottish Conservatives and Labour's Conor Savage were elected. The Scottish Tories picked up 2,027 first preference votes, while Labour picked up 1,146. The Lib Dems, meanwhile, took in 1,009 first preference votes, and the SNP had 840. Reacting to the news on Twitter, X, Scottish Tory leader Russell Findlay said, "Great Scots Tories win in the Colinton and Fairmile Head by-election, and a victory for common sense. Congrats to our new councillor, Neil Cuthbert." With the results, the state of the parties in Edinburgh now looks like this. Labour 11 councillors, SNP 17 councillors, Scottish Lib Dems 13 councillors, Scottish Greens 10 councillors, Scottish Conservatives 10 councillors, 2 independent councillors. It comes after the SNP won a seat from Scottish Labour in a by-election in Stirling. Both Cuthbert and Savage will have a busy start, as councillors are set to meet to discuss plans to introduce Scotland's first ever visitor levy. The move has been described as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity by councillor leader Jane Mear and will be voted on virtually amid the red weather warning brought on by Storm Eowyn. That article was written by Adam Robertson and read to you by Elizabeth. From The National, Friday the 24th of January 2025, from the News section. Kate Forbes issues Facebook scam warning amid fake messages. Article written by Steph Braun. Deputy First Minister Kate Forbes has issued a Facebook scam warning, reporting that people are attempting to pose as her on the social media site. Forbes has said she has been horrified to learn people are being scammed into believing she is messaging them on Facebook when she does not operate a personal account. The Economy Secretary said people have been asked to make donations to charities in messages sent by scammers. She has asked users not to engage with any messages they receive from accounts which look like her. Forbes posted on her official MSP page that this was a matter of grave concern. She said, "This is an appeal to everybody who thinks they are Facebook friends with Kate Forbes to realise that it is not me. Please note, I don't operate a personal account and I haven't befriended anybody. I am horrified to learn that people are being scammed into believing that I am communicating with them on Facebook, including asking them to make donations to charities, thinking it is at my request. Please ignore all Facebook messages from me. Do not accept any private messages from me on Facebook. Please share, as this is a matter of grave concern." That article was written by Steph Braun and read to you by Elizabeth. From The National, Friday the 24th of January 2025, from the Politics section. SNP take seat from Scottish Labour with Stirling by-election win. Article written by Adam Robertson. The SNP have won a seat from Scottish Labour in a by-election in Stirling. Councillor Bob Buchanan has been elected to represent the Bannockburn ward, with the by-election having been called after the death of former council leader Margaret Brisley. Buchanan was elected at stage 6 under the single transferable vote system, with the SNP's candidate having picked up 565 first preference votes. Scottish Labour's Yvonne Dixon, meanwhile, picked up 376, while it was a strong showing for Reform UK's William Doherty, who received 358 first preference votes. First Minister John Swinney said in a post on Twitter, X, "The first council by-election of 2025 won by the SNP. Well done to Bob Buchanan and the team in Stirling. Great electoral start to 2025. The turnout at the election was 17.6%, with 1,598 people turning out to vote. Returning Officer Caroline Sinclair said, "Congratulations to Bob Buchanan on his success. Everyone at Stirling Council looks forward to working with him over the coming years. I would like to extend a huge thanks to all our staff and partners, led by the Governance Service, for their efforts in delivering the Bannockburn by-election. Elections require detailed planning and preparation, and once again teams across the Council have collaborated to ensure that the processes ran smoothly and successfully. Local government decisions affect every aspect of people's lives, making it essential for citizens to engage in the democratic process. Thank you to everyone who participated in this by-election." That article was written by Adam Robertson and read to you by Elizabeth.
From The National, Sunday, 26th of January 2025, from the news section. UK neo-Nazi groups really excited by Elon Musk's salute. This article has been written by James Walker. Last Monday, during celebrations of the presidential inauguration of Donald Trump, the world's richest man Elon Musk slapped his right hand into his chest, fingers played. Then he stretched his right arm up diagonally, fingers together and palm facing down. It is a universally known gesture, which the billionaire made a further 2 times that evening predictably, leading to outrage. Of course, Musk has denied it was a Nazi salute. Those who suggested the opposite, from prominent historians and anti-racism organizations to Israeli newspapers, were playing dirty tricks, he said. Musk added, "The everyone is Hitler attack is so tired." His fans have suggested it was simply an outpouring of love to an adoring crowd. Others have said it was a Roman salute, a gesture adopted by supporters of Italian fascist Benito Mussolini in the 1920s who thought, without historical evidence, that it was an old form of Roman greeting. But regardless, the gesture hasn't happened in a vacuum. It comes after the billionaire has increasingly intervened and backed far-right causes in the UK and across Europe of late, including calling for the release and reportedly paying the legal fees of far-right agitator Tommy Robinson, expressing support for both Reform UK and far-right German party AfD, and generally amplifying extreme right accounts and views on social media site Twitter/X, which he owns. And it has been a serious matter of debate within the UK's far-right and neo-Nazi space. What do UK far-right groups think of Elon Musk and the salute? The Sunday National has been monitoring the activity of far-right groups and influencers active in Scotland and the UK on French social network Telegram since the riots in England and last August. And some of them were quite energized, even excited about Musk's gesture and what it meant. This has included figures within the International Active Club network, of which a Scottish branch launched in May 2023. First prompted in 2017 by American far-right activist Robert Rundle, the group combines physical exercise with far-right and neo-Nazi beliefs, with members often pictured working out and training in martial arts. Experts have suggested that this is in preparation for a perceived future race war. Writing in the aftermath of Musk's salute, the admin of a prominent active club channel, Jim XIV, said it was a shift in the overturned window, the range of subjects and arguments politically acceptable to the mainstream. If Trump, Musk, and all other beta political right has done something, it's this. There are players in this battle of values that have changed the front lines, and right now we surf on a wave of energy. The message said to the group's more than 2,900 followers, a wave of Faustian spirit reclaiming its rightful place in the heart and minds of our peoples. Whatever we think of certain political outcomes, it's obvious the game has changed dramatically. The message added that they should use this in our favor and realize that we don't need to rally around anyone anymore. They follow us. Our ideas are on top. Musk knows it. We know it. The message went on. Everybody wanna be us. Even the world's richest guy. But he is still what he is, a nerd. And in his quest for be the cool guy, he might do some stuff that breaks the enemy's moral, like saluting, for example. Patriotic Alternative, which is widely considered the UK's largest far-right white supremacist group, appears to be conflicted about Musk's salute and support of the far right, and but hopeful about the future. Mark Collett, who founded the group in 2019, spoke about it on a far-right show he hosts, Patriotic Weekly Review. The former leader of the youth wing of the British National Party said he believed Musk knew exactly what he was doing but didn't mean it, and was instead trolling. But he added it's very frustrating with Elon Musk because he brushes up against things which clearly are like, okay, this is good. But a trillionaire is not going to roll around and fix our situation for us. I don't believe in a top-down solution, but occasionally you can have things that help to boost a narrative. The white supremacist, who in a separate video earlier this year said the tectonic plates are shifting, and recently spoke with ex-Ku Klux Klan Grand Wizard David Duke, said both Musk and Donald Trump have certainly helped to up the rhetoric and help to normalize certain things. He added, we don't really make the waves, we just have to ride them. And as far as I can see, this Trump presidency is not going to be the thing that turns the demographics around and saves the white race. But if we can get anything out of it, we should. Meanwhile, David Clues, a major far-right influencer and former Scottish Tory, then Labour councillor in Renfrewshire, said he is not a fan of Musk and that he doesn't trust him. The founder of Unity Net News Network, a popular channel on Telegram which helped fan the flames amid the far-right violence seen last August, does believe there is something to gain from Musk's recent activity. However, after discussing Elon Musk's salute on a Unity News Network video show on French social media site Rumble, who said, pragmatism is the best way to be. Look at these people, look at what they're doing, and not piggyback on it. But just look at how we can use what they're doing to our advantage. An expert take. Joe Mulhall, the director of research at Hope Not Hate, the UK's largest anti-fascism organisation, said that neo-Nazis in the UK and abroad are certainly excited after seeing Musk's salute. They have taken it as a nod and a wink. They have been quite excited about it. The actual Nazi scene, the extremism expert said. On what he calls the more moderate wing of the far right, even those in the vicinity of the likes of Tommy Robinson, the attitude is more dismissive, however. They're all saying, don't be absurd. This is just another example of people trying to smear and say everyone's a Nazi, he said. Regardless, Mulhall said there are obvious signs that the far-right movement in the UK is very buoyant and growing. When it comes to Musk's involvement with it, he said it was a double-edged sword. Of course, he has dramatically amplified very extreme far-right figures, even people like Andrew McIntyre, who went into prison for 7.5 years after his role in stoking up the riots in Merseyside. This is a guy who is an extreme Nazi and anti-Semite. But on the other hand, Mulhall said many on the far right are also increasingly critical of the billionaire, especially after he recently backed a US visa program for foreign tech workers. Some people think that he's part of the problem. He's kind of a globalist. He's not overtly or he doesn't explicitly talk about being a racial nationalist. He added that debate is something that's happening across the globe, extreme right. This article has been written by James Walker.
From the National, Monday the 27th of January 2025, from the politics section, exclusive. Humza Yousaf to confront Michael Gove over grotesque IDF comment, by James Walker. Humza Yousaf has said that he will confront Michael Gove over the grotesque comments in which he said that Israeli Defence Forces, IDF, should be nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. The former Scottish First Minister and ex-Tory Minister will be sharing the floor at an event organised by the John Smith Centre at the University of Glasgow tomorrow, Tuesday. Titled Surviving Politics, Humza Yousaf MSP and Michael Gove in Conversation, the event is billed as a talk between two leading political figures about Brexit, independence, UK-Scottish relations and COVID. But Yousaf has told The National that he will also confront Gove about his controversial IDF comments from earlier this month. In a column for the Jewish Chronicle on January the 8th, Gove said that maybe it's time for then US President Joe Biden and his Secretary of State Antony Blinken to make amends with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu before they leave office. He added, "Words are all very well, but what about something more tangible? Why not nominate the men and women of the IDF for the Nobel Peace Prize?" He then suggested that Israel, who killed more than 47,000 Palestinians during its brutal war in Gaza, according to the Gaza Health Ministry, had demonstrated the sort of strength that is the only path to enduring peace. Yousaf said the comments were grotesque, adding that he thought about pulling out of the event at first. "The reason why I decided to go ahead with the event was for two reasons," he said. "Firstly, because I intend to put it to Michael Gove directly to his face just how grotesque I think that the headline was. I've got family members, Nadia's family, who've not just been made refugees by the IDF, but some of our extended family that have been killed by the IDF. To say that the IDF should then have a Nobel Peace Prize, as I say it in my view, it's grotesque. So doing this event gives me the opportunity to say that to his face." Yousaf then added that he thought that pulling out of the event would also end up being twisted by those who claim to be proponents of free speech. "I've actually never been a huge fan of not platforming people. I've always thought that you're much better to take on their arguments," he said, "and I would suggest to Michael Gove, or indeed the John Smith Centre, if they ever wanted to do a debate on the issue of Israel and Gaza, and wanted me and Michael on opposing sides, I'd certainly be up for that." And that article was an exclusive by the political reporter James Walker. From the National, Monday the 27th of January, from the news section, Scotland's top judge suggests Operation Branchform has been held up, by James Walker. Scotland's top judge has suggested that there has been a hold-up within Operation Branchform. Police Scotland launched Operation Branchform in 2021 to examine the party's use of its funding and has charged former Chief Executive and the husband of Nicola Sturgeon, Peter Morrell, in connection with alleged embezzlement. Sturgeon and former party treasurer Colin Beattie were both arrested last year, but released without charge pending further investigation. Lord Carloway, who is stepping down from his role as Scotland's Lord President, the country's most senior judge role, was asked by broadcasters about Operation Branchform. He said, "I know absolutely nothing about Operation Branchform. I don't know where the hold-up is, whether it's with the police or the Crown Office." The judge added, "It looks as though there is a hold-up, yes." Questioned if the length of time taken for Operation Branchform is acceptable, Scotland's First Minister John Swinney previously told the PA news agency, "This is a live investigation and it's important it's not added to by any commentary by politicians." Report by James Walker. From the National, Monday the 27th of January 2025, from the news section, exclusive. UK government slammed over baffling deposit return scheme announcement. Report by James Walker. Legislation paving the way for a bottle return scheme in England and Northern Ireland came into force today, Monday. The European-style initiative will see people charged a deposit when buying a plastic, steel or aluminium container before receiving the money back when they hand it in for recycling into the collection point. New parliamentary regulations have now been introduced to enable the appointment of a managing body for the scheme in April this year, ahead of its scheduled launch in October 2027. But what does it mean for Scotland? The Scottish Government's own deposit return scheme was scrapped in 2023 after the UK Government refused to allow for the inclusion of glass. Scotland's scheme would have seen shoppers pay an extra 20p when purchasing a beverage in a can or bottle, which would then be returned to the customer once it was brought back for recycling. Despite the UK Government initially allowing devolved nations to design their own scheme, it refused to provide the Scottish Government with an exemption from the Internal Market Act, particularly in relation to the inclusion of glass in the scheme. Then Circular Economy Minister Lorna Slater said that without an exemption, Scotland's scheme was no longer viable. Since, waste firm Biffa has even started £150 million legal action against the Scottish Government after the plans fell through, as it looks to recoup money lost after investing in the recycling scheme. The new legislation announced by the UK Government on Monday doesn't apply to Scotland directly, but it does have some implications. Following this announcement, October 2027 is expected to be the start date of a UK-wide scheme, although both Wales and Scotland have signalled that they plan to include glass in theirs. Lorna Slater hits out at UK Government. The Scottish Greens co-leader said she was pleased that the UK Government has finally done what it promised to do years ago and caught up with Scotland by proposing its own deposit return scheme. This just makes it more baffling why the UK Government chose to collapse Scotland's scheme, which was due to launch in 2023, she added, however. We could already be seeing the benefits in Scotland of less litter on our verges, in our parks or on our beaches, if the UK had simply granted an exemption to the Internal Market Act and respected Scottish devolution. Now, the UK Government will have a fight on their hands to get this scheme off the ground. How they convince businesses to invest in this scheme when they collapsed the last attempt in the UK is a barrier they will have to cross. Slater went on, "I'm disappointed to see that the Labour Government have kept the Conservative-era exclusion of glass from the scheme. Glass bottles were taken out by Rishi Sunak's government without any explanation. Business and environmental cases both show that the scheme is more effective and viable when it includes glass. A bottle recycling scheme that doesn't include glass bottles seems a bit like a joke. I hope that the UK Government will not let its low ambition hold back Scotland and Wales from including glass in our schemes. Deposit return schemes are an effective way of reducing litter, increasing recycling and saving local authorities the costs of managing drinks container waste. It is well overdue to have such schemes in the UK." And that article was an exclusive by James Walker, and it was read by Ian McKenna. From the National, Monday the 27th of January 2025, from the news section, exclusive. Why Scottish raptor numbers are up in this Cairngorm sanctuary. Report by Lorna Hannett. Since 2019, a conservation restoration project has been underway in the Cairngorms to support the thriving populations of birds of prey. Wildland Cairngorms, which owns an 80,000 hectare estate in the heart of the Highlands, is committed to preserving this land for raptor conservation. Over the past 5 years, the estate has seen a significant increase in the number of native raptors coming to nest and breed. The programme has achieved remarkable successes, including the resurgence of hen harriers, golden eagles and goshawks, with one species even reaching a 100% survival rate. Since 2019, Ronan Duggan from the Wildland Estate, along with teams and volunteers including the Raptor Monitoring Group, have been tagging and tracking the movements of hen harriers, goshawks and golden eagles. By tagging the birds, Wildland Cairngorms was able to track their movements, providing crucial insights into their needs, habits, behaviours and the threats they face. We did quite a lot of tagging for 3 years of golden eagles, hen harriers and goshawks, said Duggan, interested in understanding the insights of where the young birds disperse. Some of the young eagles established territories in other parts of the country. That's been nice to engage with other landowners and partners in different areas. Duggan explained that the estate transitioned from intensive traditional management and land use for grouse shooting to more sustainable practices, avoiding harer burning and predator control. As a result, each bird of prey now thrives alongside other species such as foxes. We have a whole suite of different habitats. We have a lot of space for these birds, said Duggan. We're just focusing our efforts on the habitat, allowing it to recover with deer control, deer management to let the trees of the peatlands recover. And then we have been planting some trees in some areas, but then just the natural regeneration to create a mosaic of habitats, he added. Since conservation efforts began in Scotland, there has been a notable resurgence of birds of prey across the Highlands and Islands. The numbers are increasing, and of course there's still a lot of space, said Duggan. As a result of their efforts, wildlife cairngorms reached a record 100% survival rate in hen harriers between 2022 and 2023. To measure this number, wildland cairngorms looked at the nests and the fledgling success of the pairs on the estate. Duggan mentioned that 2023 was a fantastic year for birds, particularly for the hen harrier, with each nest producing 4 to 5 chicks, thanks to the safe haven provided by the estate. Golden eagle numbers have also increased, with breeding pairs rising from 4 in 2021 to 7 in 2023, a species once widespread across southern Scotland but is now limited to only a few pairs. One pair of golden eagles within wildland cairngorms has been very productive in recent years. They have hatched twins for 4 consecutive years, said Duggan. We've seen eagles, or young pairs of eagles, moving into some of the lower areas, but not too far from the villages and the forests. Historically, that's the kind of place where eagles weren't thought to be, but now that they've been given a chance to increase and become more widespread, young pairs of eagles are finding this site and establishing those traditional areas that come with the species resurgence and change in land use, and potentially the change in prey availability due to the change in land use. Golden eagles are not the only birds who have seen an increase in numbers, as 2 pairs of goshawks, a species once driven to extinction in the UK due to persecution, successfully bred on the estate in 2021. Duggan explained that the expansion of the work in the native woodland in the cairngorms has been extremely important for the return of the goshawk and to the prey they depend on, as the species is an elusive predator of the forest and open spaces. We are providing a safe refuge for them to come and breed them. I'm sure this spring we'll find another period of breeding, said Duggan. This team effort to help endangered species thrive again in Scotland was made possible by volunteers, the Wildland Cairngorms and the Raptor Monitoring Group. And that article was an exclusive by Laura Hannett.
From The National, Monday the 27th of January 2025, from the comment section. Storm Eowyn is not once in a generation, but the first of many. Article by This Is Rigged. The climate crisis is not just staring us in the face. It is tearing the roofs off our buildings, it is flooding our streets and cutting our power. While we must ensure that any further damage is stopped, our mission has to be to radically reorganise our society so that it can withstand the coming disasters. Storm Éowyn has been dubbed a once-in-a-generation weather event. Hearing once in a generation or record-breaking on the weather forecast, however, is losing its novelty. If there was a trophy to be won for the most weather records broken in a 5-year period, we would need to buy a bigger trophy case. Everyone remembers the devastation to life and trampoline that Hurricane Bobag wrought in 2011, or the flooding in 2024 across Greenock and Barmulloch, with Scots and Falkirk even kayaking down main roads and across car parks. Storm Éowyn is simply the latest in a long line of climate catastrophes that are growing ever more regular and intense. Storm Éowyn is not once in a generation, it is just the first one this year. As Scotland wakes up and assesses the damage, it is obvious that it is the most vulnerable in our society that will be the most affected. On Sunday, police confirmed that a worker has since died after a tree smashed into the roof of the van he was driving during the storm. Rough sleepers in Edinburgh rode out the storm in tents that they had tied to door handles. Elderly and disabled members of our communities were left without vital home visits as care professionals could not travel during the storm. We have campaigned against oil and gas in the past, but we know that mitigating climate change is no longer enough. We have to build resilience into our communities. We know that storms like Éowyn are going to continue to wreak havoc and annihilate our food supply. We have lost the opportunity to decide whether or not the climate crisis happens, but it is not too late to decide how we respond to it. How can we rise up in the face of disaster? Do we want a food system where food prices skyrocket after each storm so the CEOs can retain their profit margins? Or do we want a system that shares what we have and makes sure no one is left hungry? The first step is to build one community food hub for every 500 households. If we provide free meals to anyone and everyone, we will relieve pressure on people from having to work in unsafe conditions. We can build networks of provision for unhoused, elderly and disabled people by creating a space where members of the community can meet freely. While we build this resilience, we must continue to oppose new oil and gas and all projects that harm the environment. For our vulnerable island communities, every degree of warming could mean another community lost to rising tides. Storms or no storms, it is up to us to decide what our future looks like. And that article was written by This Is Right.
From the National, Tuesday the 28th of January 2025, from the news section. Alliance. Palestine protesters spray paint Glasgow building. Article written by Amy Miles. Police are currently in attendance at a Glasgow city centre building amid an ongoing incident. Officers were called to 58 Waterloo Street in the early hours of Tuesday morning. It is believed that the building is currently occupied by insurance company Alliance. A police presence remains outside and the area has been taped off. A window has been shattered and the words "Drop Elbit" have been written on the walls in red spray paint. It has been confirmed that pro-Palestine group Palestine Action were behind the incident due to the links Alliance have with Israel. A spokesperson for Palestine Action said, "Palestine Action's campaign to remove Israel's weapon trade from Britain will continue to use the necessary means, direct actions against Elbit and the companies that aid, abet and profit from the slaughter of Palestinians. As Alliance prioritises the value of profits over the lives of Palestinians, we will ensure they lose more than they gain by working with the Israeli weapons maker." A police spokesperson said, "Around 2:40 a.m. on Tuesday, January 28th, we received a report of vandalism at a business premise on Waterloo Street in Glasgow. Inquiries are ongoing. Alliance has been approached for comment." And that article was written by Amy Miles. From the National, Tuesday the 28th of January 2025, from the news section. Suspected drug deaths in Scotland down by 10%. Article written by Neil Purin. Suspected drug deaths have fallen by 10% in the latest quarterly data, with drug-related attendances at A&E seeing a similar decrease. Incidents of naloxone administration, which can prevent heroin overdoses, were also down by 30% in September to November last year. The latest Rapid Action Drug Alerts and Response (RADAR) report noted that the contamination of illicit drugs with toxic substances is common and widespread across drug types. It said, there remains an urgent need for hospital toxicology and accessible drug checking services across the country. There has also been an increase in novel benzodiazepines circulating in Scotland, while cocaine continues to play a leading role in drug harm. Between September and November, there were 215 suspected drug deaths, with this figure being 10% lower than the previous quarter and down by 15% from the same time last year. Drug-related attendances at A&E were down 10% from the previous quarter and 16% lower than in 2023. The Scottish Ambulance Service recorded 700 naloxone administrations over the time period, down by 30% from the previous quarter and down 34% from the same period in 2023. The figures will not encompass the effect of the UK's first safer drug consumption facility, which opened in Glasgow in January. The Thistle Centre saw 131 attendances in its first week of operation. Health Secretary Neil Gray said, "Through our 5-year, £250 million national mission on drugs, we're taking a wide range of actions, including working towards the opening of drug checking facilities which would enable us to respond faster to emerging drug trends, opening the UK's first safer drug consumption facility pilot, and widening access to residential rehab, treatment and life-saving naloxone. We've also maintained a record of £112 million to local alcohol and drug partnerships for treatment and support services, and in addition, national mission funds have now backed more than 300 grassroots organisations and projects, helping to support more than 33,000 people. We're also working hard to respond to the growing threat from polydrug use, including street benzos and cocaine, and from highly dangerous synthetic opioids like nitazines in an increasingly toxic and unpredictable drug supply. Such synthetics increase the risk of overdose, hospitalisation and death, and are being found in a range of substances. Because of their strength, I would urge people to carry extra life-saving naloxone kits." And that article was written by Neil Pooran. From The National, Tuesday the 28th of January 2025, from the news section. Students to protest Michael Gove and Humza Yousaf talk in Glasgow. Article written by Hamish Morrison. Students will protest an event at Glasgow University featuring Michael Gove after he called for the Israeli military to be given the Nobel Peace Prize. The Spectator editor and former Tory minister will appear at an event with former First Minister Humza Yousaf at Glasgow University on Tuesday evening. Yousaf previously told The National he would confront Gove about his grotesque praise for the Israel Defence Forces, IDF. Students have now announced they will protest the event, branding him a genocide supporter. In a post on Instagram, the Glasgow University Justice for Palestine Society said, "How dare he praise the Israel Offensive Forces? How dare he have the audacity to come to our campus and try and educate us? Shame on Glasgow University for hosting him. If he thinks he is welcome on our campus, he's got another thing coming." Gove drew criticism for his praise of the Israeli military after he suggested, why not nominate the men and women of the IDF for the Nobel Peace Prize? Responding to Gove's comments, Yousaf said, "I've got family members, Nadia's family, who've not just been made refugees by the IDF, but some of our extended family that have been killed by the IDF. To say that the IDF should then have a Nobel Peace Prize, as I say in my view, is grotesque. So doing the event gives me the opportunity to say that to his face. The event is billed at a talk between the two major political figures who are set to discuss Brexit, independence and COVID. Glasgow University and Gove were approached for comment." And that article was written by Hamish Morrison.
This is from The National on Tuesday the 28th of January 2025, from the comments section. Why have the SNP stripped independence from the Scottish budget? This article is by Xander Elliards. Victory for John Swinney. That was how the Daily Record's political editor characterised the news that the Lib Dems would be backing his first budget at the head of the Scottish Government. But is it any such thing? The SNP leader looks to have caved to a headline-grabbing demand from the Lib Dems in order to secure their support for the budget, not one penny of spending on independence. Indeed, the SNP's 2025-26 draft budget does not mention Scottish independence even once, let alone in its spending plans. Contrast that against the 2024-25 budget from 12 months ago. That not only included funding to provide the people of Scotland with further information on the opportunities of an independent Scotland within the EU in the building of a new Scotland series. Finance Secretary Shona Robison made clear the SNP's constitutional aims in no uncertain terms. Devolution can serve as a shield that only partially helps to mitigate against Westminster austerity, she wrote in her budget foreword. It is only with independence that Scotland can chart its own course to grow a well-being economy to help its people in the way that serves them best. Robison added, "We have always said that to truly transform our economy, society and public services, and to reap the benefits of Scotland's resources for current and future generations, we need the full powers of independence and to retake our place in the European Union." Instead, for 2025, Robison's foreword states an aim of a budget that, while it may not meet all that we would want, can command broad support to help improve the lives of the people of Scotland. But why would the SNP need to settle for compromise in the budget? Especially compromise that removes all spending and even mention of their party's founding goal. The answer is they simply did not need to. Scottish Labour feared of being seen to vote against the budget's proposals to scrap the two-child benefit cap and reintroduce a winter fuel payment, had already said they would be abstaining. Anna Sarwar's capitulation earlier in January actually was a victory for Swinney and sparked ire from the Tories and Greens, who accused Labour of having thrown in the towel without even trying to secure any improvements. With Labour's MSPs set to abstain, the SNP were free to pass their budget. They didn't need the support of the Greens or the Lib Dems. On Tuesday, they won that support anyway, but it came despite both parties having won concessions and drawn opposing red lines. The Lib Dems, as mentioned, said they would never back a budget with any spending on independence. The Greens, in response, said they would not back a budget without it. Now it seems the Lib Dems have come out on top. Group leader Alec Cole-Hamilton certainly thinks so, telling media, "It's the first time in this Parliament that nothing will be spent on independence." A group of 4 MSPs, not even big enough to qualify as an official party under Holyrood rules, have seemingly stopped the Scottish National Party-run government from even talking about independence. And they've done it despite the Greens and Alba providing a clear pro-independence majority in the Parliament. Is that what a victory for John Swinney looks like? And that article was written by Xander Elliards and read by Lynn McNeil. This is from The National on Tuesday the 28th of January 2025 from the comments section. Will Westminster really compensate WASPy women after SNP bill victory? This article is by Hamish Morrison. Westminster has voted to give the SNP permission to introduce a bill that will never become law to give compensation to WASPy women. Strip away the spin and that is what happened in the Commons on Tuesday afternoon.
Stephen Flynn looked quite pleased with himself as he walked up to the Speaker's chair, doing that silly halting walk MPs must do, to present his waspy compensation bill. The SNP's Westminster leader may have been surprised he was allowed to introduce his bill, given that the Labour government is pretty set against compensation. This does not pile pressure on the UK government to compensate waspy women, given the rebellion, such as it was on their side, amounted to 10 MPs, including the increasingly reliable awkward squad backbencher Brian Leishman. That is a measly 10 MPs compared with up to 10.5 billion the government reckons it would need to spend to compensate the waspy women. Per Parliament's rules, the bill can now be read a second time, though as the Commons website sets out, the chances of this actually taking place are slim. They are surely even more slim when the bill in question demands the government spend billions of pounds it would really rather not. Flynn's bill is at the bottom of quite a large pile, and despite his demands that the government must make time in the parliamentary schedule to ensure the bill can progress, they are under no obligation to do so. But he was right to outline in his speech that regardless of one's stance on this specific issue, there is an overarching problem of trust in politics. If it hurt Keir Starmer, or any of his top team, who had their broken promises to waspy women read back to them, as Flynn did, they might want to find a different line of work. For most people, saying one thing and then doing another seems to be an essential skill of top politicians. Flynn was also correct to raise the fact that his bill would merely implement the recommendations of the Parliamentary and Health Service Ombudsman. If the public felt they couldn't turn to the Ombudsman, he asked, upon whom could they rely to fight their corner? Certainly not their Scottish Labour MPs, who chose to sit on their hands, except Leishman, rather than back the independent Ombudsman or even their own colleagues in Scotland. MPs voted unanimously earlier this month to back a call for the UK government to compensate waspy women. This particularly delighted the SNP, always keen to highlight an example of when Anas Sarwar's authority is undermined by his colleagues in Westminster. While it gives gleeful spinners plenty to work with, it also underlines the more serious point made earlier about trust in politics. Why should Scottish Labour MSPs get the chance to pat themselves on the back for supporting the waspy campaign in Holyrood, where they can do nothing to help them, while Scottish Labour MPs get to duck responsibility in Westminster? This victory might be little more than political shenanigans used to exploit Labour's weaknesses, which will lead to nowhere. But that won't deter the waspy campaigners, who have surely proven themselves indefatigable by now. And that article was written by Hamish Morrison and read by Lynn McNeil.
This is an article from the politics pages of The National, published on Wednesday, the 29th of January. It's written by Lucy Jackson. A third of homes in Scotland are living in fuel poverty. A third of homes in Scotland are living in fuel poverty, according to new statistics. Figures published by the Scottish Government on Tuesday show that an estimated 861,000 households were in fuel poverty in 2023. This has increased from the 2022 fuel poverty rate of 31%, or around 780,000 households. Of the 34% of households living in fuel poverty, 19.4% were living in extreme fuel poverty in 2023. Meanwhile, 18% of all households found that their heating keeps them warm enough in winter only sometimes, while 6% said they felt it never keeps them warm. Scottish environmental campaign group Friends of the Earth Scotland said that the latest statistics show that the scale of the harm caused by fossil fuel giants. Campaigners called on the Scottish Government to deliver on improvements to people's homes, while also moving to a transition towards renewable energy. Freya Aitchison, an oil and gas campaigner at Friends of the Earth Scotland, said, "Cold homes are killing people and ruining lives. As fossil fuel companies were extracting tens of billions in profits from the price crisis, tens of thousands more households in Scotland were pushed into fuel poverty. SSE wants to burn expensive gas to generate electricity at Peterhead for another 35 years, trapping people in the same rigged system that benefits them, and is dictated by volatile gas markets far beyond our control. The Scottish Government has been far too slow to deliver the improvements to people's homes, which will improve health, cut bills and cut emissions. We need a rapid and fair transition to publicly owned renewable energy, which is already cheaper than fossil fuels, because the longer we are delayed, the more our energy bills skyrocket and the greater danger we are all in. Responding to the latest statistics, Housing Minister Paul McLennan said, "We continue to support vulnerable households within our limited devolved powers, including through our energy efficiency delivery programs Warmer Homes Scotland and area-based schemes." Mr McLennan added that the Scottish Government had recently announced additional funding worth £41 million to tackle fuel poverty, including £20 million through the Scottish Welfare Fund, and an increase of £20 million to the Warmer Homes Scotland scheme. He said that the increased funding would help around 1,500 additional households save an average of £400 per year on their heating bills. However, Mr McLennan added that the powers to make a real difference remain with the UK Government. He called on the UK Government to introduce a social tariff for energy bills, as proposed by the Scottish Government. Mr McLennan continued, "The levers to make a real difference remain with the UK Government. We continue to urge the UK Government to introduce a social tariff mechanism, which is the best way to ensure that energy consumers are protected against high costs and can afford all of their energy needs. We take the safety of tenants very seriously and are committed to tackling disrepair in housing and by ensuring that good maintenance is given a high priority. We are working with local authorities and other housing providers to ensure that people live in warm, dry and safe homes." The number of homes failing the Scottish Housing Quality Standard has reduced from 60% in 2010 to 38% in 2023. That article was written by Lucy Jackson.
The National News on Wednesday the 29th of January. Eastern Bartonshire teachers to strike over pupil behaviour. An article written by Nicole Mitchell. Teachers at a school in Eastern Bartonshire are set to take industrial action after claiming that pupils face no consequences for abuse and violent behaviour. Staff at Kirkintilloch High School say that they have raised concerns about pupil behaviour, but claim that they've been gaslit by management, the BBC reports. Teachers claim that they regularly face swearing and violence and say that pupils are allowed to roam around the corridors when they should be in class. According to the National Association of Schoolmasters and Union of Women Teachers, or the NASUWT Union, staff believe that pupils face no serious consequences for their behaviour and that restorative approaches are overused. The BBC reports that from Wednesday, February the 5th, teachers will refuse to cover classes and will not take trips or activities. Eastern Bartonshire Council said that it was in discussions with teaching unions over the concerns. Mike Corbett, a Scotland National Officer for the NASUWT Union, said, "Members feel blamed and gaslit by management for the poor behaviour of pupils. They report being told at debriefing meetings that their lessons are not fun or engaging enough. A culture where there are no consequences for poor behaviour is not setting up pupils well for adult life and fails the employer's duty of care towards its staff." Anne Davey, the Chief Executive of Eastern Bartonshire Council, said, "We have fully engaged with the school management regarding the NASUWT staff concerns, and we're currently in discussions with the union to try to resolve the issues that they have brought forward." An article written by Nicole Mitchell. The National World News on Wednesday the 29th of January. Just 6% of Greenlanders want to join the United States, a poll says. An article written by Steph Braun. Only 6% of Greenlanders are in favour of becoming part of the United States, according to a fresh poll. According to Danish daily newspaper Berlingske, which commissioned the survey by pollster Varian, around 85% of Greenlanders do not want to become part of the United States, with 9% undecided. It comes after Donald Trump said last month that the Arctic island was vital to United States security and that Denmark should give up control of its semi-autonomous territory. The US has considered purchasing Greenland from Denmark at least twice before, including in 1867 and in 1946, and President Trump set out his desire to try to do so again in 2019, something which was shot down by the Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen. On Tuesday, Ms Frederiksen said the latest message from political leaders across Europe was that there must be respect for the sovereignty of states. The clear message from friends in the Nordic countries and in Europe, and also outside Europe, is that there must of course be respect for territories and the sovereignty of states, she said. This is crucial for the international community we have built together since the Second World War. The US military has a permanent presence at the Pituffik space base in the northwest of the island, a strategic location for its ballistic missile early warning system. Greenland was a Danish colony until 1953, when it was redefined as a district of Denmark. In 1979, it became a self-governing territory within the Kingdom of Denmark, although Denmark still has control over foreign and defence policy. Since 2009, it has the right to declare independence if Greenlanders vote for it in a referendum. Greenland's Prime Minister, Mette Frederiksen, who has stepped up a push for independence since the turn of the year, has repeatedly said that the island is not for sale and that it's up to its people to decide their future. The independence movement has gained significant traction in recent years, due in part to multiple revelations of misconduct by Danish authorities last century, including a forced contraception campaign in the 1960s and the 1970s, where Inuit women and girls were fitted with intrauterine devices to prevent pregnancy. Speaking to The National last month, Mark Jacobsen of the Royal Danish Defence College said that there is no doubt that if a referendum happened, Greenlanders would likely vote for self-determination. There's been some detailed surveys showing that there is a strong movement for independence, but what they don't necessarily agree on is what independence means, he said. Does that mean a continuous close relationship with Denmark? Some parties think anything but Denmark is better. Mr. Jacobsen added, there is a lot more attention being paid to historic abuses, really serious human rights violations in Greenland. There are a lot more people saying that we've had enough. An article written by Steph Braun. The National, on Wednesday the 29th of January. Opinion. Panic drives Labour's plans for the economy. A column written by Seamus Logan. For Labour, the last few days have all been about economic growth. Specifically, the lack of it around in the UK just now, and how the Prime Minister and the Chancellor reckon it might be stimulated. This rapid swing from talking about the doom and gloom of the Tory economic legacy to a near-rictus-grinned mania over the economic opportunities ahead has truly been something to behold. Amidst the party's mounting poll gloom on both sides of the border, however, it remains to be seen whether anyone will be taken in by it. In many ways, it's surprising that it's taken Rachel Reeves and Sir Keir Starmer so long to cotton on to this line of endeavour. For having spent the election denying the existence of any black holes in their spending plans, the Chancellor is now finding herself completely hemmed in by the fiscal rules she so foolishly committed herself to in opposition. Armed with little more than those iron fiscal rules and a desire to be performatively tough on what they clearly saw as soft targets, such as the winter fuel payment recipients and the WASPy women, Labour had hoped that their economic credibility would by now be well established. And from there, greater political credibility would then surely flow to help shore up their shaky electoral mandate. Except it hasn't. In pursuit of that elusive economic credibility, Labour has instead burnt through significant reserves of political credibility. Constrained by those self-imposed fiscal rules, the Chancellor is now desperate for growth in any area from any sector, which might allow her some headroom to invest in something more positive. If it's hard to be sympathetic, it's also hard to see right now where this growth is going to come from. Apparently, some of it will be underpinned by a re-engagement with China, a resetting of the relationship with the EU, and by working closely with a new US administration. Well, good luck with all that, as they say. Clearly, there's going to be no good news for pensioners, particularly WASPy women, not just any time soon, but at all. Although the SNP vote was easily won yesterday in the 10-minute rule debate, this issue will come back to the Chamber and there will be no hiding place for the Labour MPs then. However, if you're a non-Dom, it would seem that the Chancellor is getting ready to roll back on her election commitments and keep at least your favourable arrangements in place. To govern is to choose, and it's abundantly clear which side an increasingly desperate Labour is now choosing to be on. Our old friend, getting rid of bureaucracy and unnecessary regulations, has also made a reappearance. Cutting red tape as a shorthand description for a series of efficiency in process is fine, but as a sudden and rapid route to growth? If it really was that easy, then even the most sclerotic of governments would have already done it, whatever it is, a long time ago. Away from reimagining process, making it easier for pension funds to invest domestically is something which is, to be fair, long overdue. But the biggest headline grabber, so far at least, is the suggestion that the UK government might be about to give the green light to a third runway at Heathrow. It's easy to understand why this might seem like an attractive option for the Chancellor. As a statement of ambition for global Britain, it's hard to think of anything more visible. And if you want to show that you can take the big decisions that your predecessors couldn't, and at the same time flick the proverbial V's to the tree huggers on your own side and possibly even your own London mayor into the bargain, then it ticks about every political box there is for the UK Labour leadership right now. But it's also hard to think of a project which does more to underline the failure of a British model. A model which sees suckling investment and talent to the southeast of England as the default route to economic growth, and which has fooled itself into thinking that stewardship of the environment is somehow a binary opposite to present or future prosperity. If the HS2 project was ever to be more than an expensive white elephant, then it needed to be going from London to Scotland, rather than petering out somewhere in Cheshire. And to really get people out of domestic flights, it also needed to be going through Heathrow. Instead, it will serve as little more than a hugely expensive commuter line between Birmingham and Euston. Its cost increased several-fold by the objections of the Tory-voting NIMBYs of Oxfordshire and Buckinghamshire. Whether it's in sustainable aviation fuel produced at Grangemouth, the hydrogen economy, or investment at scale in renewables, there are green pathways to growth which also help to deliver economic security. Yet at every stage, Labour and the Tories spurn that path to repeat the mistakes of the past, like Hinkley Point nuclear power station, or pouring cash into the infrastructure of an already overheated South East England. That combination of economic and political short-sightedness gives us perpetual UK governments which are tough on growth and tough on the causes of growth. It means that all parts of the UK outside that gilded southeastern corner and the marginal Westminster seats of the English Midlands end up getting held back in a way which no amount of levelling up or city deals will ever adequately compensate for. The Union and its politics can't change this economic doom loop, because it's the Union and its politics which perpetuates it, regardless as to which party is in government. Persuading our fellow Scots that independence is what is needed to break out of that cycle is a task which grows increasingly urgent. A column written by Seamus Logan, who is the SNP MP for Aberdeenshire North and Moray East. The National News on Wednesday the 29th of January. Scotland to Europe ferry delayed until 2026 after a funding hold-up. An exclusive article written by James Walker. Plans for the return of a Scotland to mainland Europe ferry have been delayed until spring of 2026. Derek Sloan, the shipping expert behind the project, told The National that the delay was due to issues with border control in Rosyth and continued funding delays. He stressed, however, that the implementation partners are still in place and ready to take the project forward. We previously reported on how the route could be reinstated by the spring of this year if either the UK Government or the Scottish Government helps with start-up funding to redevelop the port facilities in Rosyth. DFDS ferries are hoping to operate a route between Rosyth and Dunkirk, with campaigners noting that the 3 weekly return sailings could be transformational for Scotland. Graham Downey met with Treasury Minister Spencer Livermore last month as he looked to secure £3 million for the service. But the Labour MP for Dunfermline has since confirmed to the National that the UK Treasury is unable to fund the route directly, apparently due to Labour's new National Wealth Fund having a minimum threshold of £25 million per project. Transport Scotland has previously said that they are liaising with DFDS on the potential for a waterborne freight grant scheme application, but have repeatedly stressed that the route had to be delivered on a commercial basis. Mr Downey previously said that Rosyth was perfectly positioned for the service, and all that is needed is to improve some of the roads and access space for new security checks, as well as the installation of power and associated works. Mr Sloan previously said that the demand from the public, Scottish exporters and importers, the freight, transport and tourism sectors has been immense, with all of them stressing the need for a direct route from Scotland to continental Europe. An exclusive article written by James Walker.
This is from The National on Thursday, 30th January 2025, from the comment section. The West is cynically turning a blind eye to Rwanda's ongoing war. By David Pratt. They were images that epitomised the Tory party's controversial policy on asylum seekers. Carefully choreographed, the television reports showed the then Home Secretary Suella Braverman touring the newly built facilities in Rwanda that were meant to house deported asylum seekers from the UK. To say that the images and the plan left many queasy at the very least and outraged at best would be an understatement. And in many ways, the whole abysmal project was almost inevitably doomed to fail from the get-go. Dead and buried was how Keir Starmer summed up the plan shortly after coming into office last year. This, though, didn't stop Starmer, barely a month later, meeting Rwandan President Paul Kagame in Paris, where he stressed that the UK wanted to continue strengthening ties with the Rwandan government and was looking forward to working closely with Kagame across a range of shared priorities. Tory or Labour government, Britain has always had a very cosy relationship with Kagame's regime. And come to think of it, much the same too could be said about a number of Western countries. Tony Blair once called Kagame a visionary leader, while former US President Bill Clinton described him as one of the greatest leaders of our time. For decades now, foreign assistance, much of it British in the shape of military and strategic aid, has flowed into Rwanda. As far back as 13 years ago, Britain was Rwanda's biggest bilateral donor, with an average of £83 million. That sum has continued to rise, despite concerns over Rwanda committing human rights abuses and crimes in neighbouring Democratic Republic of Congo, or DRC, with the goal of exploiting the DRC's vast mineral resources. Fast forward then to this week, and now appears to be the capture of Congolese city of Goma by M23 rebels, a group UN reports show is backed by Rwanda. Even UK Foreign Secretary David Lammy this week in the Commons was forced to admit that M23 rebels could not have taken Goma without material support from Rwanda Defence Forces. That, however, was as far as any UK rebuke of the Kigali regime went. And anyway, Kagame's government, of course, denies this, insisting that if its troops were there, it would only be to protect the Congolese Tutsi community and their own borders. It's not the first time the M23 has seized Goma, doing so back in 2012. But on that occasion, Western donors immediately brought pressure to bear, forcing Kagame's regime to pull its gunmen out. This time, things are different, with only a few desultory voices of criticism, let alone diplomatic pressure, being brought to bear. And here's why. To begin with, most in the West still have a soft spot for Kagame, a leader that veteran Africa correspondent Michaela Wrong, who has written extensively about Rwanda, describes as ruthless and whose opponents live in fear of assassination at home and abroad. Then there are other convenient ties, especially military ones in the case of the US. Rwanda too serves in UN peacekeeping operations abroad, and its troops protect French gas operations in Mozambique against the partly Islamist-inspired insurgency there as part of an EU-funded mission. And then, above all, of course, there is that all crucial access to Congo's vast mineral wealth, including reserves of coltan, 80% of world supply, without which there would be no computer microchips, and our digital world would grind to a halt. Just last year, the EU signed a strategic minerals deal with Rwanda, fueling criticism that it was stoking the conflict and giving Kagame a green light in Congo. It's against this backdrop that the M23 rebels have rolled into crucial mining areas there, killing and displacing countless innocent civilians, while much of the world turns a blind eye. It was Jason Stearns, author of The War That Doesn't Say Its Name, The Unending Conflict in the Congo, who summed up the current situation perfectly, writing in the Financial Times a few days ago, "This time around, we seem to be living in a different world, one in which migration, business investments and other national concerns are more important than humanitarianism and where apathy trumps solidarity." Other analysts say that this time around too, M23, under Rwanda's guidance, is looking to its territorial gains in eastern Congo for the long term, behaving in ways that suggest it plans to establish an administrative state, collecting taxes and imposing fines on residents. This has even prompted some to suggest that Kagame has done a Putin in Congo. In a recent article, though admitting a parallel between Russia and Rwanda is imperfect, The Economist magazine still drew comparisons between Russian President Vladimir Putin's 2014 grabbing of the Donbass in eastern Ukraine and using local separatist forces to do so, and what Kagame is doing today in eastern Congo. Both, of course, have denied such moves. For the moment, Kagame, despite persistent questions over his dictatorial regime, territory grabbing, warmongering, and accusations of alleged smuggling of coltan and other blood minerals out of Congo, remains Teflon when it comes to many Western nations. So far, beyond a few vocal criticisms and warnings, there have been no discernible, actionable diplomatic measures. And in answer to those who would ask what can be done, The reply would be, let's start with what worked last time when M23 overstepped the mark with Kagame's blessing. Use our aid provision as leverage. The very fact that Rwanda is a country, at least a third of whose budget comes from donor aid, means even Kagame would likely sit up and take notice if it was threatened. Right now, what we are witnessing is a conflict that could be tamed with strong international pressure, but is instead being allowed to escalate in Rwanda's favour, while hundreds of thousands of people are displaced and at the mercy of M23 gunmen, whose infamous reputation over human rights violations is well known. After many visits to the region and the city of Goma especially, I'm more than familiar with its troubled and turbulent past history. But what we are currently seeing is yet another example, so common worldwide at the moment, of taking other people's territory illegally and next to nothing by way of accountability. Watching these events unfold, it's hard to disagree with Congo expert Jason Stern's highlighting of what might be a more sinister explanation to what's in play here, one whereby if the powerful stand by while Congolese suffer, they must want it so. What a depressing thought and indictment in a world already reeling from such cynical geopolitical and corporate exploitation. That article was by David Pratt. This is from The National on Thursday, 30th January 2025. From the Culture section. Scotland's National Library unveils centenary programme. By Laura Pollock. The National Library of Scotland has announced it will mark its 100th birthday with a programme of events and initiatives throughout 2025. The Edinburgh Institution was established by an Act of Parliament in 1925 and has since amassed and cared for a collection of more than 50 million items spanning centuries on behalf of the people of Scotland. A nationwide Love Libraries campaign will highlight the importance of libraries and encourage people to show love for their local resource from around Valentine's Day. A major centenary exhibition, Dear Library, celebrating libraries and what people love about books and reading, is also set to open in June. Writers Val McDermid and Damien Barr are also set to be named Centenary Champions this year. National Librarian Amina Shah said, "A century ago we were established in the spirit of egalitarianism, where our founders, including Sir Alexander Grant, held the firm belief that the people of Scotland deserved a national library to call their own, one which anyone living here could access. The Act of Parliament states that we exist to collect and preserve the national collections and make them accessible to the public through our reading rooms, exhibitions, and other means of engaging people with Scotland's culture and heritage. We increased our efforts to reach more and new people with the collections in recent years, with great success, and our intention is to accelerate this during the year of our 100th birthday by working in partnership with Scotland's network of amazing libraries. And so I'm delighted to announce our centenary programme, a nationwide libraries campaign, our major exhibition, our national tour, all of which have the potential to connect with every individual across the country. It is our ambition that the impact of our centenary programme will have on communities throughout Scotland will continue far beyond 2025. That article is by Laura Pollock.
That concludes this week's edition of the National Podcast. Please remember to subscribe to our channels at Q and Review and to tell your friends about our service.